Hello. All right, so we're in endocrine now, and what we want to do is we're going to cover, you should have already watched a video that shows you what the organs look like. So if you haven't, do that first. That way you have an idea of which endocrine organs we're talking about, where they're physically located in the body, and what they look like as their gross anatomy. So where the thyroid is, where the pituitary gland is, the pancreas, the thymus. So in this lab, we want to look at the histology. And I know you guys hate histology, but oh well. But it's important. It's important to know how the tissues look microscopically and to understand the different types of cells that make up the tissues and what they actually do. So as you're learning some of the physiology, and we say something like, okay, they're found in these lobes, or in I think the alpha cells or the beta cells or the acinar cells. You go, oh, I know where that is. I've seen the histology of that. So I'm going to run through this real quick and go through endocrine histology. Well, I said I was. Okay, so we're just going to kind of work our way through the different glands. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the pituitary gland. And hopefully you've been watching some videos and you're starting to learn that the pituitary gland is actually two. There's a posterior pituitary and an anterior pituitary. So if you think about the brain, you've got the pituitary sticking down. There's like two little glands, individual glands, the anterior versus the posterior. And the anterior pituitary is known as the adenohypophysis. So the pituitary gland, the fancy name is the hypophysis cerebri, which means it's near the brain. And so adeno, whenever you see the word adeno, that means glandular. Okay, so glandular. And it's actually made up of during embryology, during development, it's made from some tissue from the top of your mouth. So kind of think like tonsils and salivary glands, so it's glandular. Whereas the posterior pituitary, the neurohypophysis, is actually made up of tissue that's kind of coming from the brain. So it's kind of like you have mouth tissue and brain tissue coming together and forming these two glands that we call the pituitary. So when you look at this tissue, the anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis looks very glandular. And I know you're saying, well, it doesn't look glandular to me. It will once you've seen plenty of glands. You'll say, yeah, it looks just like all the other glands I've looked at. Very small, tiny dots, whereas the posterior pituitary looks more like brain. And so you can actually, the cells are fewer apart, they're not as densely packed, and it looks more like neural tissue. Okay, you just have to kind of trust me on that. So here's a blown up view of the anterior pituitary. So again, you have all these densely packed cells, and I know they're densely packed because the little dark dots are nuclei. So everywhere you see a dark dot is a nuclei. You can also see some individual cells. You can see some basophils and acidophils. I'm not going to ask you those, but you can see a few of those on here, and you can see some blood vessels. Okay, but so all these little dots here, these are going to be the nuclei. All these little dots, the nuclei of these cells. So it's really densely packed. Here we're going to kind of go up a little bit bigger, so you can see some of these individual cells with their nuclei. Again, you don't have to be able to identify the acidophils and basophils. Just I want you to see that you have all these nuclei. You have these densely packed cells. Okay, so this is your adenohypophysis. Now the posterior pituitary, it looks more diffuse. It's kind of looser tissue. It's not as densely packed. You don't see as many nuclei. So these are the nuclei that we've got marked. And you can see the nuclei are further apart. This is 400x, which means the high power. This is 400x, so the same power. And you can see the cells are more diffuse. So imagine if you think back to the brain, how the brain had those neurons, and so when you looked at the brain, the neurons were kind of spread out compared to like muscle tissue, which is very compact. So this tissue is more spread out. So it looks like nervous tissue, and it is because it's an an out pocket from the brain, which makes the posterior pituitary. Now, you guys, you've got to do the homework and figure out which hormones come from these glands. So as I'm telling you where they are and what they look like, your job is to tie that to their particular hormones, okay? And you got to figure out, okay, what hormone is coming from these glands and where is it going and what does it do, all right? So you've got to be tying all this together. All right, you have your thymus, so if you remember your heart, and you have that gland that lies over the heart, and it's divided into big lobules, so I call it the pizza slice. Okay, that big pizza slice is your lobule. And whenever you look at organs, if you think back to the brain again, do you remember the outside of the brain was called the cortex, the cerebral cortex, and the inside of the brain was the cerebral medulla? So when you think about organs, they have an outside, which we call a cortex, and an inside, which we call a medulla. And so these lobules are divided that way as well. They have an outer, so if you were, this is a cut through this gland. And so you're able to look at, you're looking at kind of a cross-section of the lobule. So you're looking at the outside cortex, which is the darker staining layers. So see how it's kind of dark all the way around? And then the medulla, the inner layer, is going to be this more pink or lightly stained area. So for a test question, I was, okay, name this tissue, and you say, okay, well, it looks like thymus. That's okay, name this region, and that would be the cortex. Name this region, that would be the medulla. And I might say, okay, what hormones produced by this gland? Okay, so this test is a little bit more than just point to it and identify it. Make sure you're understanding which hormones are coming from these glands. And again, I'm going to leave that for you because I can't do everything for you. You'll learn it as you're going through this unit. So again, this is a little more blown up version. So again, you can see this is a lobule. You can see that connective tissue that's dividing the lobule. You see the dark purple, which is the cortex. You can see the densely or less dense lighter pink area, which is the medulla. And there's one more structure that if you see this, you should go, ah, that's thymus, okay? And it's this little kind of swirly, what I call the hurricane. And it's called a Hassel's corpuscle, all right? So I'm going to zoom in there. So it looks like a little swirly hurricane. And so if you see something that looks like a swirly hurricane, all right, then that's going to be a Hassel's corpuscle that's inside this medullary or medulla area. You should be automatically thinking thymus. So that would, I call that a landmark. So there's going to be some key things you look at. So a darkly purple stained lobe with a dark exterior cortex, a light pink interior medulla with these Hassel's corpuscle. And then here's one more. So this, again, I call them the swirly hurricanes. So if you see something that looks kind of like a hurricane, then that's a Hassel's corpuscle. Okay? All right, so the next pair of glands, we're going to talk about the thyroid and parathyroid. So if you think about a person, so right in front of the neck, you have the thyroid gland, and on the back side are the parathyroid glands. They're embedded in the back side. So this slide, they took the section where thyroid and parathyroid glands meet. Okay, so what you're seeing is this is thyroid, everything below, and everything above is parathyroid. And this looks very glandular. Parathyroid looks very glandular. It looks a lot like the adenohypophysis. Those densely packed dark staining nuclei. So you're getting an idea of what glandular tissue looks like. So the thyroid gland, to me, it looks a lot like adipose. Remember the bubble wrap from 201? So if you see something that looks a little bit like adipose, that's a landmark again. Say, it looks kind of like big bubble wrap. That's going to be thyroid tissue. I'm never going to ask you parathyroid unless you can see a little bit of thyroid, okay? Because parathyroid, because it's glandular, it could literally be anything if you're not well trained. So I will always give you a little bit of a hint. If I'm asking you parathyroid, I'll make sure there's a little bit of thyroid in the field of view to kind of let you know as kind of your landmark, okay? So hopefully, or maybe not yet, you've learned what the thyroid does. It makes T3 and T4, and you're going to learn how iodine is added and how thyroid hormone is made. But it all occurs in the thyroid in these things called follicles. And so you probably haven't, like I said, you may or may not have watched this yet. But here you have a follicle. So the big round circle is the follicle, okay? And it's filled with something called colloid. So the pink stuff that you're seeing filling up the follicle is the colloid. Now, what makes the follicle, which kind of borders and makes this actual structure, are called the follicular cells. So these little cells here are your follicular cells. They ring the follicle. All right? And then between these follicles, you have another set of cells called extrafollicular cells. Okay, so you have follicular cells, which make the follicle, and extrafollicular cells, which are between the follicle. So again, I'm not going to give you a whole lot of information now because there's time for you guys to study and start to add things together. So as you're looking at your lecture notes, which hormone is being made by the follicles? What's going on? What's the role of the extrafollicular cells? Obviously, I wouldn't point these out if they didn't have meaning. So, again, we're in 202 now, so we're starting to do some independent learning. So what's the role of the follicular cells? What's happening in the colloid? And what's happening with the extrafollicular cells? Okay? And here's just another picture. I'm showing you another version of it. So here again, you would have your colloid surrounded by the follicle made up of all these little follicular cells. And then in between these follicles, you have those extrafollicular cells. Sometimes you'll see them called parafollicular cells. All right, so here's your parathyroid tissue. And again, I will always make sure that you can see a little bit of thyroid, just because if I was to look at this, I might think that was a thymus, okay? And I kind of know what trips you guys up, because I know it's not a thymus because what I'm seeing is there's no cortex and medulla. You've got, it's all basically the same tissue. But if you see that, you might think it's a Hassel's corpuscle. In this case, it's just the blood vessel in the parathyroid tissue. So I will try not to trip you up. I'll make sure you can see a little bit of thyroid on your exam. Now, the cells that you're seeing are chief cells. Okay, so the purple dots are the nuclei of those chief cells. So again, if I'm telling you chief cells, they must do something. That's on you. Go figure out what they do. All right, so look at those chief cells and figure out what their job is. What are they making? All right, so your next tissue is the pancreas. So if you think about a person, you go down into the abdomen. It's going to be behind the small intestine, kind of near the spleen. The pancreas has two roles. It plays a role in the endocrine system and also in the digestive system. So when we're talking about it as an endocrine organ, it makes things like insulin and glucagon. And when you're thinking about it as a digestive organ, it makes different kinds of enzymes that are used to break down food. So we're talking about it as an endocrine organ. So again, this looks glandular because you're seeing all of this, these dark purple nuclei. Now, I think I just said, I know I did. So the pancreas has an endocrine function and an exocrine function. So if you go back to 201, we talked about how glands can be endocrine or exocrine, okay? So the endocrine function, okay, this means they're making hormones, okay? The exocrine, this is going to be the digestive. And the exocrine, that means they're going to leave the organ through a duct, very much like a sweat gland, remember that? So they make something that's going to leave through a duct. So these are pancreatic ducts, all right? So this is the exocrine portion of the pancreas. So in this low power, we mostly see these exocrine tissues that contain acinar cells and pancreatic ducts. All right, so the acinar cells are part of the exocrine function, or the digestive function. So acinar cells, digestive function, they make their substance. It goes in these pancreatic ducts, and that goes out to the digestive system. What about the endocrine? Well, to see the endocrine, you have to focus in a little higher. This is 400x. And what you look are for some light areas. Okay, so this looks a little bit lighter. And these are called islets. Okay, so these are called the islets of Langerhans. Islet of Langerhans. And this is where your alpha and beta cells are. Okay, and these are the endocrine cells. They make insulin and glucagon. I'm going to let you figure out which one does which. One makes insulin and one makes glucagon. And these are secreted into the blood like hormones, okay, because they are hormones. All right, so the islets are these little lightly stained areas with these alpha cells, beta cells, and also delta cells. But you can't distinguish those on a microscope. So all you got to know is that they're the islet cells that contain the alpha and beta cells that make insulin and glucagon. So here's another version of that picture where you can see the darkly stained acinar cells and these lightly stained islands. So these are the islands or islets of Langerhans. Here's another stain of the pancreas. This is all the exocrine. Again, it looks very glandular, just like the parathyroid and the anterior pituitary, okay, the adenohypophysis. You have a large pancreatic duct. You see a large lumen here. So this is where things can exit out of the pancreas. All right, so look for, and it looks kind of like a Hassel's corpuscle, I get it, but look for a lumen. If you see a lumen, then that tells you it's a duct. Okay, it means it's a tube. So look for a lumen, and that's your, again, a landmark. So you'll see glandular tissue with some kind of a pink structure. It looks like a vessel. Look for a lumen, and that tells you it's a pancreatic duct, so you're going to be in the exocrine version part of the pancreas. This is just a picture of an artery and a vein, just to remind you, if you're looking and you see these, you're trying to figure out pancreatic duct versus artery and a vein. It was an artery. It's going to have a thick tunica media, that thick, smooth muscle cell wall that gives arteries their shape. And if it's a vein, it looks like a collapsed rubber band. Has a thin, smooth muscle layer. And again, look for the lumen. All right, so they look different. And plus, arteries and veins are always going to be next to each other. You'll see an artery and you'll see a vein. So that should also be a clue. This is adipose. Okay, so it does kind of look like thyroid tissue, doesn't it? Yeah, to me it does anyway. All right, so the next gland is the adrenal gland, so adrenal, so above the kidney. So these are going to be glands above the kidney. So if you think about the kidney, you got that little triangular shaped organ above it. If you do a cross section, it's going to be kind of a triangular shaped organ, and it's going to have an inside and an outside. It's going to have a cortex and a medulla. So the whole outside is the cortex, and then the inside is the medulla. So we have taken a cross section, and now we're looking, we've blown up, let me draw this again. So we're going to blow up an area like this, okay? So you've got your cortex and your medulla, all right? So the medulla, again, looks very glandular, so look for that same kind of stuff you've seen before, densely stained tissue. And the cortex actually has 3 parts to it, or 3 zones, so 3 layers. 4 if you count the capsule. So the capsule is the outermost layer. It's kind of fibrous layer, that connective tissue that holds the whole thing together. It's like, kind of like a pericardial sac almost. It's just, it holds it together. It's a capsule. What else are you supposed to say? It's a capsule. Gives the gland its shape. All right, well, underneath that, you have 3 zones. You have the zona glomerulosa, the zona fasciculata, and you have the zona reticularis. Okay, so again, the 3 zones. So glomerular, glom means kind of round, and so if you can imagine, it's kind of hard to see on this particular, this one. I know you've got some in your textbook, and I'll try to find some better pictures too. It's those little round balls here. So it's this basically the ball zone. Okay, so zona glomerulosa. The zona reticularis, what's reticular mean? Web-like? So to me it's the zona whatever. Yeah, it's just kind of going in every different direction. Okay, so it's very web-like. Now, the zona fasciculata, you have fascicles. That's things that run in straight lines. So do you see these things that run in straight lines? So you have a ball zone, all the little round glomerular type structures here, these straight lines, zona fasciculata, and then this kind of mesh-like zona reticularis. And then just deep to that, this very glandular medulla. So on a test question, I would say name this organ. It would be adrenal gland. I might say name this large area, cortex or medulla. Name this small layer, zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, or zona reticularis. Again, haven't told you, but what does it do? Go look it up. Each one of these things that I'm talking about, the 3 zones in the medulla, all do something hormonal. It's on you to figure out what they do. Oh, I knew I had a better picture. So again, here's that capsule, which gives the adrenal gland its shape. And then the first layer, the first zone, the zona glomerulosa. Here's the balls. So look for a zone that's kind of got these circular structures, and then just deep to that, you get these long, straight fasciculata, and then the reticularis. Okay? Oh, that's it. All right, so that's all the histology you've got to know. I think that's probably enough. Don't forget to go back and find on your models, make sure you can find these organs and on the gross anatomy, the structures on the models. So there's a video for that as well. All right, guys, thank you very much, and I will see you again. Let me figure out how to stop this thing.